He's got a salmon colored shirt on. Real men wear salmon. Yeah, let's take all the BTW stuff off, except. Want to? Make Dave work for it.
It is 6:30, and I would like to call the June 17th, 2020 regular meeting of the Holland City Council to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd,
Present.
Peters, Garcia,
Here.
Trethewey,
Here.
Arnsworth,
Here.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Here.
Raymond. Here. Mayor Box.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to begin the meeting as we have for some time, starting with an opening prayer by Councilman Myron Trethewey, Mike Trethewey, immediately followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd ask that you join us if you'd like.
If you're so inclined, please pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you as a humbled people, humbled by the beauty and awesomeness of the world that you have given us to live in. We ask that you be with us this evening during our meeting and during our discussions and deliberations. We ask that you be with the citizens of the City of Holland. We also ask that you be with all the city employees and keep them safe and out of harm's way. And especially those first responders, those that protect us both near and far. Keep them under your watchful eye. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next are our consent agenda items. The items that are listed with an asterisk are considered generally to be routine, and unless otherwise requested by a member of the public or by a member of council, will be voted on with one motion. We'll ask the city clerk to read through the consent agenda, and then I will ask if any member of the audience, member of the public, would like an item removed from the consent agenda, at which time it will be placed in its regular location on the regular agenda. And then I will ask the city council the same. Kathy, would you please read the consent agenda for us?
Approval of minutes, June 3rd regular meeting, June 10th study session, oaths of office, written petitions, industrial development district requests, All Properties Unlimited LLC at 899 Interchange Drive, and High Point Real Estate and Development, 796 Interchange Drive. Board of Public Works, engineering and design contract for corroded water main replacement in 8th Street from Reed Ave to US 31. Lift station assessment consulting, decorative lighting locating service contract, approval of updated HBPW terms of service, rate books, and fee schedule, COVID-19 extension of temporary customer policy recommendations, bond authorization resolution for the aerobatic digester project. Planning Commission, proposed rezoning of 1321 M40 and 1301 Waverly Avenue from PUD to I-1 for first reading, final adoption July 1, 2020. Proposed rezoning of 285 West 36th Street and portions of 904, 906, and 926 South Washington Ave from R1 Family Residential District to PRD Planned Residential Development District. Final adoption on July 1, 2020. Proposed amendment to section 39-200 of the zoning ordinance to continue short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods with final adoption July 1, 2020. Clerk, claim filed against the city. Community and Neighborhood Services, proposed text amendments to Chapter 14 of the City Code to continue non-owner occupied short-term rentals with final adoption on July 1, 2020. Finance, April financial reports, purchasing, award fire protection services bid, finance, amend professional services agreement with A.J. Gallagher for insurance services, amend GVSU vehicle lease agreement, management and administrative services, human resources fiscal year 2021 non-union wage adjustment proposal, city commercial refuge and recycling agreement fiscal year 2021 to 2026, board of review, reappointment of city officers, Downtown Development Authority Board, reappointments, revocable license agreement, projecting sign, 66 East 8th Street and 72 East 8th Street, revocable license agreement, projecting sign, 32 East 8th Street, Windmill Island Gardens concession agreement, revocable license agreement, car wash interest improvements, 809 Washington Ave, revocable license agreement, fiber optic cable, 43 East 8th Street.
Thank you. Is there any member of the audience that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? If so, please come forward to the microphone. Not seeing any. We did receive, I just want to make council aware of the fact that through the public comment at cityofholland.com email address, we did receive a request in the public comment to remove an item from the consent agenda and move it to the regular agenda. But that is outside of our typical practice to do that through an email, but rather to have somebody here in person to do that. And I would leave it up to council to make the determination of whether or not they wanted to do that. And it was the two items that were related to the 36th Street items that are on first reading. Is there anyone on council that would like to move something from the consent agenda to the regular agenda?
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
So you're referring to, let's see,
I believe it's items M and N on the consent agenda. Oh, no. Just M. Just M. I'm sorry, not N, just M.
So what was the gist of the request, just to have us discuss it?
The request was to move it from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. It's an item that's only going to be on first reading this evening. During first reading, we generally do not discuss the matter because it hasn't been brought before council yet. With this particular item, it's going to be on the study session agenda for next week. And at that point, we'll be receiving staff reports and also presentations from the developers. So there isn't an opportunity
There's
to.
no public hearing, there's no anything.
Not at this point this evening, no.
So if we brought it out of the consent agenda, it would just,
It would give anyone here the opportunity to speak to it at that portion of the regular agenda within this meeting, but any of those people could also could speak during the regular public comment period.
sure.
So we wouldn't be preventing anybody from speaking, it would just be moving the time that they would be speaking.
And we would all have a chance when it comes before us for the second
Exactly,
reading. Okay.
exactly. Anyone from council that would like to move an item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda?
Your Honor,
Yes, Mr. Hoekstra.
I then propose or request that item 4M be removed from consent.
All right, and that will then move that item into two different places on the regular agenda, item 12B2 and item 16B. And just to give a heads up to the city attorney, I'm going to be asking you when we get to item 12B2, how exactly we should handle that, because these items are typically on the consent agenda, and I want to make sure that we're doing it correctly with both places on the agenda. So I'll just give you that heads up so you got some time for that. Yep, thank you. Any other requests to move items from the consent agenda to the regular agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adopt agenda as amended and presented.
Moved by Trethewey, is there support?
Support?
Support by Ernsthorst. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd? Yes. Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Corbin? Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. In every public meeting, we give the opportunity to the general public to speak to council. We would like to note that this is one-way communication. This is communication from you to us. We don't answer questions or respond to the communication at this point. We do ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you'll notice, there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me here. One is green, one is yellow, one is red. If the light is green, you've got plenty of time left. If the light is yellow, you have 1 minute left. And when the light turns red, your time is up, and we're very strict about that here. We would also ask that any comment that you make here is not an item that you would be commenting on an item later in the agenda. So if there's anyone here that would like to make public comment, speak to council, please come forward.
Good evening.
And could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Ann Henriksen, 338 Royal Park Drive, Zeeland, Michigan. Racism. Racism is not white, but comes in all colors and is often a reaction or retaliation to the initial abuse and neglect. It is an entanglement, one upon the other, and we're dealing with it nationally and here in Holland. I had sent you all a lengthy letter after the 6/3/20 council meeting concerning racism in the Greater Holland area. 3,000 marched in the peaceful demonstration on the Unity Bridge. This is real, and the pain in our country is something we can be determined to move forward and no longer ignore. This is something that should not be taken as passing events, waiting for it to blow over to move on, and I have heard these comments. It is for the City of Holland Council to act to refuse to have racism in our area. This is on the shoulders of all of Holland. This city has been called City on the Hill, meaning extraordinary. It is known for its generous, caring spirit for the people that live here and those that are our guests. We have a severe blight in this nation, and we are just as guilty as anyone else. What good are civil rights laws unless we are determined to come together to hear what is needed, supporting not only our peace officers and firefighters, but people of color? Again, I want to thank Councilman Byrd for his sincere and heartfelt concerns over the recent murder and shootings of African American men and women. Please do not distract us from the needed conversation and events that will remove any racism out of the Greater Holland area. Please take the lead. This week was a clarifying event from the Supreme Court of the United States. This is in line with discrimination in employment for the LGBT plus individuals. This is justice for those who are LGBT plus in the workplace to secure them employment. As is suggested, this will influence public education, businesses, housing, accommodations, etc. The struggle between religious freedom and cultural behavior will no doubt continue. At this time, we do not need to get involved, but focus on what is at hand, racism. I'm asking that this council use caution and wisdom in continuing to delay and even eliminate the need for an ordinance for protection for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. It appears that as a nation of LGBT persons have the civil rights protected thanks to the High Court of this land. The council priority item of diversity, equity, and inclusion is now nationally accomplished. I can see how the LGBT Holland is Ready group and any other organizations would be disappointed that an ordinance is not now necessary. The truth is that they have a greater accomplishment for our nation. May the LGBT plus community members join the efforts to fight racism and see that they too will gain compassion and unity for all who live here. I have this evening a copy of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King's message, "Love Your Enemies," from 1968, for each of you to ponder. It is so pertinent for today. We can respectfully move forward with the help of our faith leaders, educators, and peace officers to overcome racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Do I? Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to address council? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item is written petitions and communications. As I alluded to earlier, there is an email address that we have set up, publiccomment@cityofholland.com, for anyone to be able to make public comment if they do not feel comfortable and not able to attend the meetings. There are two different items that we have received under that. One is from Ted Ozimek regarding trash collection contract review, and another one from Ann Hendrickson, as she just referred to, on Holland and racism. And I would entertain a motion by council to accept those as information.
We have four of them listed on.
You've got four. I must have an older version. I apologize. I've got an older version. I printed my agenda out too early. So there are two other ones.
If I might help
yes.
you out then.
Please do. Well, I have it here on my screen. I didn't have it on the printed version. I've got it on the screen. So it's Ted Ozimek regarding trash collection contract review, Ann Hendrickson, Holland and racism, Bob Ashby, social unrest, and Mark Volkers regarding the 36th Street rezoning proposal. I would entertain a motion to accept those four items of public comment through the email into the record.
So moved as stated.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support? Support by Byrd, I believe that was. Was that you, Quincy? Yes. All right. Any comments or discussion by council? Kathy, would you please call the roll on that for me?
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnsworth?
Yes.
Corbin? Yes. Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you. Next item is reports from boards, city offices, and commissions. The restated Holland, Wyoming Water Interconnect contract. Dave Koster, I believe, is here from the Holland Board of Public Works. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you for giving me time tonight to talk about a couple items that are coming through from the Board of Public Works, and I think these items are important to highlight. The fact that there's great regional cooperation that's going on in our area as it relates to utility functions, and so just want to be able to recognize that, and again, thanks for giving time in the meeting to do that. The first item deals with an interconnection that we have on our water system with the city of Wyoming. This really dates back to conversations that the two systems had back around 2005, when both systems were looking at eventually needs for increased capacity as well as resiliency in their systems by being able to, at times, back up each other if there was an emergency or a failure of some component within one water system or another. It would actually provide that. So sides worked on that for some time, and then in 2011 we actually formalized an agreement with them. But at that time, that agreement was an emergency only situation, so only in times when one system would be in a situation where it couldn't supply its water, then it could draw upon that water from the other system. But there's another benefit that the two parties were looking at long-term, and that was the prospect that there might be opportunities for supplemental water. So as one system or another might outgrow its treatment capacity and its plants, as an alternative to building new plant, actually utilizing some of the asset of the other facility. And so while neither system really is at that point right now, matter of fact, Wyoming has made increases in their water plant before this interconnection was completed. The Holland system probably would be the next system to do that at some time down the road, but again, that's quite far off. But we're pleased that Wyoming has agreed as well that to look at restating this agreement from an emergency only to a supplemental water agreement. And so just a reminder, this connection with them exists, a 30-inch line that goes along 160th Street in Park Township that connects the two facilities. It's really been a success to date as well. We've had a couple of events. One was a planned event, one was an unplanned event, but our transmission main, our main source of water coming into the city is a 36-inch line that runs along Ottawa Beach Road at parts and actually kind of traverses also the airport property in Park Township. That line had developed a leak a couple of years ago, back in actually 2017, and we had to remove a section of that from service, and this interconnection was vital to us being able to continue to support the community at that time. And then later in 2018, we had a valve replacement where we were upgrading some valves, and again, this interconnection became very important to us. So just what we're doing at this point is restating this agreement, again, from an emergency only to a supplemental water agreement. Now, how that's going to work is if we do take water under this agreement, there's a rate that's established for that, and that rate is the same rate that Wyoming is charging other Ottawa County communities that its water plant serves. So we know it's a cost-based sort of rate, and it's one that is vetted through the contracts that exist between Wyoming and its other communities. So again, don't anticipate a very significant utilization of it at this time, but it is one that sets us up for options in the future and additional resiliency. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions anybody has.
Great, thank you, Dave. Any questions from council? All right, seeing none, what's the pleasure of council?
Motion to adopt the recommendation.
Moved by Trethewey, is there support? Support by Hoekstra. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnsworth,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Peters,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Next, this is also you, Dave, isn't it?
It is.
Go, I'll just let you go right ahead.
All right. The next one is a maintenance agreement with Holland Charter Township. So again, leveraging the skill sets and the assets and personnel of the various jurisdictions. Holland Township has its own water distribution system. It's a pretty sizable system itself. And this really comes on the heels of the decision that this council and our board and Park Township as well made to move Park Township from a wholesale relationship with the City of Holland BPW to a retail relationship north of the lake for water service. And in looking at that, for years, Holland Township had done part of the service of maintenance for Park Township. So with that transferring over to the BPW now, we had to put an agreement in with Holland Township, which really gave us an opportunity to step back and look at the division of responsibilities and where the skill sets were best suited to be able to maintain that system. And so I'm pleased to say that, again, with strong cooperation between Holland Township and the BPW staff and the City of Holland, we've reached an agreement here which will have Holland Township maintaining the area north of Lake Macatawa, and specifically things like servicing the water mains, valve maintenance, hydrant maintenance, any service line repairs or replacement, staking activities as it relates to those water mains, and then meter reading. But meter reading for a while, because we're actually going to be upgrading and replacing the meters in that area and bringing it into our automated metering system. So just for a period of time, they will also do metering in that area. We'll be the ones to install and maintain the meters. We'll be doing sampling and maintaining quality of the water in that area, and also managing what's an important program. It's called our cross-connection program, and that is where you want to make sure that you don't have some sort of system or device within your home or your business that could potentially push back into the water system some sort of contaminant. And so, we have a program to make sure that those cross connections are inspected and working well, and so we will do that, and then overall have management, for the system. In this particular agreement, Holland Township will actually charge cost-based rates, and really, I think fair way of doing it is looking at the relative miles of service lines and distribution lines in the entirety of what they maintain, their own system, as well as this area in Park Township, and the proration then, based upon those miles aligned, will be the determination of what that annual bill is. And again, the sides agree to true up if they're finding that there's a disproportionate amount of time being spent in one system or in another system outside of a plus or minus 5%, then there's a true up associated with that. It's set up to be an indefinite term of the agreement, but it does have a 1-year termination provision. So if something is moving along and we're finding that we're better suited to do some of this work ourselves at some time down the line, or a change in the division of responsibilities, there is that aspect that we can indicate notice in a 1-year basis. So again, just a really good example of some regional cooperation that I wanted to point out tonight. So I'll answer any questions anybody has on this particular item.
Great, thank you, Dave. Any questions from council?
No, I just want to say your reports are always very clear with a good rationale, and I almost feel like I understand it.
Thank you. That's great.
Any other questions or comments from council? All right, what is the pleasure of council?
Motion to adopt the recommendation as stated.
Moved by Trethewey, is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. Any comments? Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arsworst,
Yes.
Corbin. Yes. Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Peters. Yes. Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. That brings us to item 12B2 in regard to the 36th Street property. And Ron, I teed this one up for you to give you a little time to give us some guidance on process and procedure here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item before you tonight shows up in 2 places on the agenda. At 12B, it's a recommendation from the Planning Commission to place the proposed ordinance amendment on the schedule for first reading. First reading happens down the schedule further at 16. But the action at this point would just be to accept the proposed ordinance amendment to change the zoning for the 36th Street property from R1 to PRD to place that on for first reading.
Okay, so that's, if I'm understanding you correctly, 2-step process. One is to accept the recommendation from the Planning Commission to put it on first reading.
Correct.
Then it goes on first reading on item 16 under the agenda, and then we vote on accepting it as a first reading item
At 16, the motion would be to accept it or accept it for first reading.
for first reading.
Yeah.
All right, great, thank you. Mr. Van Beek, do you want to do a report on this at this point?
So while we have staff here and developers here, I would recommend, but certainly we have the ability to do other as council would prefer. Our recommendation is that you receive any comment from the public this evening. Next week at our study session, the intent is this will be the primary and a long presentation and opportunity for questions and discussion by council in that setting, which certainly I've gotten the feedback from council where study sessions, that's really ideal to have those types of, prodding and questioning and discussion. So I would recommend that we reserve that presentation portion for next week. All of the materials are in your agenda packet this evening, so you certainly have the ability to, if you've already done that, or before next Wednesday, dig into that. But that would be our recommendation. Then we'd have a study session next week. Of course, study sessions, there's no votes, there's no action taken. And then July 1, should you approve this for first reading this evening, then July 1 would be the evening where we would do probably a modified presentation, and then that would be the time for you to have further discussion and ultimately a vote.
Great, thank you. And following our process and our government's process, Mr. Van Beek's our employee. Every other staff member works for Mr. Van Beek. Do we have any questions? And I'm going to accept that as your staff report today. Are there any questions from council for Mr. Van Beek?
Your Honor,
Yes.
since I took this off consent, I would just like to speak to it, my rationale for that, very, very briefly. I have to admit, I have no burning desire to engage in a lengthy discussion tonight about this, because that's coming up at future dates. However, we serve at the pleasure of our constituents, and so I thought that perhaps if there was anyone who came here tonight who wanted to speak to that, I wanted to afford them the opportunity to do that. So basically, that's stupid mask. That's basically why I removed it from consent. So I guess I would just offer that to anyone who's in the room who would like, hopefully briefly, to speak to this evening.
Yep.
They would
Yep.
have that up.
And definitely, and following our typical order with this, I'm going to let council ask any questions of staff first, and then we'll have the public comment period on it. Any other questions or comments from staff to Mr. Van Beek? All right, are there any members of the public here who would like to speak in regard to this agenda item? And if so, please come forward. The same 5-minute rule applies that did during the general public comment period. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mike Orzum, 265 West 36th Street. This new proposal, 42 units on the end of 36th Street, just blindsided us a few weeks ago, a month or so, or maybe a month now, I guess. Came out of nowhere. You know, we had been talking last year. There was some meetings and stuff last year, and it was down to just the city property. Now I see Mr. Darby has his wants his property included in that. From what I understand, I look on this project, 36th Street project site, you know, and from what I seen from the Planning Commission meeting last week and what's on the site now, there's a little bit of difference and stuff, but 42 units down there. There's 10 houses on 36th Street. It's 20 feet wide in front of my house. 20 feet. If I park a car on either side, you ain't getting out a golf cart down that street, you know. And you want to turn it into a boulevard? There was some talk at Planning Commission about, oh yeah, the traffic will be fine, don't need a stoplight. I don't know that you need a stoplight, but man, I think you need at least a turn lane, a left-hand turn lane on 32. I don't know that you can fit it in there. I really don't think you can. I just, there's the issue with the flooding that the people to the north in Pioneer Village there had. People on the corner, on the dead end on 36th Street, they had issues. What's going to happen to them poor people? Nobody seems to have an answer, you know. I asked these questions at the Planning Commission. I sent an email, made a couple of phone calls, and it's just like, well, we'll take care of it later. That's the one that really gets me. They want to build us 42 things. So what are you going to do with 36th Street? Well, we'll fix it later. Okay, that's the only way in and out. Unless Mr. Darby, in his generosity, would use the medical center there. You should see the drive that goes from Washington Avenue all the way through that medical center to a road, a driveway that goes all the way through the property that he wants to be included in this. It's there. It's there already. And it's way wider than you could make 36th Street unless you started encroaching on private property. It's there. And he wants that to be the emergency access. You know, and you know why you need an emergency access? Because 36th Street is not enough access for 42 houses down there. Come on, people. Use just a little common sense. You're 10 houses. That road serves 10 houses, and now you want to make it 52? Okay, you know, that's a little more traffic. You know, is there going to be a traffic jam all day, every day on Washington? No. But there's going to be a lot of times when there's people, when Washington Avenue can get really busy. And yeah, you're stuck. And I already see people diving through the parking lots behind the medical buildings there to get around, especially different times of the day. You ain't looking for nothing but a problem. And I see my time's just about up, and there's 100 other things I could talk to you about the poor people on the west side there. You know, they bought in good faith, saying, no, there's not going to be any building on that property. I was told that also, that there would never be anything. I was also told there would never be a driveway from the parking lots onto 36th Street from the medical buildings. But hey, yeah, sometimes things happen, huh?
Thank you. And please know this will be on our agenda on at least 2 more meetings, and there will be public comment during those meetings as well if there are additional things that you would like to say. Anyone else who would like to speak in regard to this subject? And just tell us your name and your address, please.
My name is Cal Prince, 318 West 35th Street. Am I read already, or?
Yep, he's got you.
Oh, yeah, that was quick. I'm kind of in a unique position. I am one of the homes that are on I have buildings on West 36th Street, and my home is on the private drive on the west side of the property. I'm not going to go through all the details, but as you, and some of you haven't even looked at what is coming up yet, but if you look at the security and the use of 36th Street very closely, I would appreciate it. The security of the people that live around the area, because this is a big change from an R1 to basically an R3. So my question would be, if this is decided to rezone and it's decided not to go forward with the condos or what they're proposing, does this remain that way, or does it go back to R1? Because if it just open after that fact, you know, you can put a lot of things there different than what's there now. I'm concerned about the traffic that's on 36th Street, as well as the parking. There is no parking right now. Many of the people park on my parking lot because you just can't park on 36th Street, and I don't know where they're going to go with all the traffic. So if you would look very closely at that, and we'll talk about it again next week, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Anyone else that would like to speak in regard to this subject?
I keep forgetting to do this in between. Sorry, Cal.
Anyone else? All right, I'll close the public comment period on this regard. And what is the pleasure of council? And I believe that
This was presented for information at this point, correct? And put it on first reading?
Well, it's not really presented for information at this point. It's presented before you to, the motion would be a motion to place it on for first reading.
There is, because it was on consent, there was no formal, so motion to place 12B2 on first reading.
moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Airsource. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next item, approve consultant proposals from WSP for traffic engineering services. Brian White's going to be here?
Yeah,
for that?
Brian's going
Brian?
to step
Okay.
up and speak to this, but just as he's coming up, I would just definitely encourage and recommend adoption of this proposal. Brian and his crew, with the amount of development work that we've had and just taking care of our own network, I think this is an important piece of the puzzle for Brian. So as they're needing to manage work, so he doesn't work quite the ridiculous number of hours that sometimes I think he does, and also just to make sure that we're being responsive for things that come in. This is, I think, a very worthy proposal and something I would recommend.
All right. Thanks for that, Keith. Good evening, Mayor Box and council members. Before you tonight is a request to approve two proposals from the consulting firm of WSP for a combined amount not to exceed $20,000. And it's traffic engineering services, traffic reviews, assistance with our traffic operations and traffic signals, as well as assistance with capital projects. As you can appreciate, some of our capital projects deal directly with traffic engineering, but then a lot of them have just ancillary needs where having a few hours of a traffic engineer to participate and inform the designs on those capital projects would be very helpful. So that's really what we're trying to do here with the two different proposals. One, to capture those areas for capital projects, and then two, on the other side of the house from an operating standpoint to capture the operational needs, as well as things like third-party reviews for developments and things like that. So again, those are the kinds of things we would like to achieve with the firm of WSP. You may recall WSP did provide services for us, and I think they were great in terms of traffic engineering for our downtown traffic study that was recently completed a few years ago, as well as a few other things traffic engineering related. I did provide in the council report just a comparison with another firm, OHM Advisors, to basically perform a check to make sure that the billing rates are in line with what the industry is out there. So it is pretty comparable. We found that to be the case. If council does approve the proposals, then we would be able to have these services again on an as-needed basis up to that budgetary limit through the end of the next calendar year, so the end of '21. So again, that's the recommendation before you tonight. Certainly, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Brian? Just one comment from me. You are definitely hands-on. As Brian knows, I think he knows what I'm going to say here. I was
I
at the
do.
corner of 32nd, or excuse me, Vinralty and 16th Street yesterday, and Brian was out there with an orange vest on, moving traffic barricades for a construction project that was going on out there.
Yeah.
So you are definitely involved at all levels of these projects, so we
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Mayor. You know, we actually, for those of you who may have been traversing through that 16th Street construction project early on, we did have a few hiccups there. We have ironed those out to some extent. There's a few more signs that we need to get out there, but anyway, it was, again, something that we were able to get cleared up, but yeah, you can pretty much do anything from day to day. It is what makes it interesting here at the City of Holland, so appreciate it.
What is the pleasure of council?
Move we approve.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Trethewey. Any discussion?
I was glad to see it's part of the budget. It's not a extra and thing that we have to scramble to handle.
Mhm.
But your work is, I mean, I see you all over in my neighborhood too, so I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin,
Great, thank you.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, finance, fiscal year 2019-2020 year-end budget amendments. Mr. Van Beek?
Mr. Vagley.
Just wanted to make sure we did the handoff correctly there. Mr. Vagley?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This is a time of year where we're going to take a look and make some amendments to the budget. Thank you. I didn't print out these, so I didn't have them handy, so appreciate it. Ooh, look at that. The handoff. So we amend our budget 3 times a year usually, and sometimes we'll amend it more often if needed. Typically, if there's an item that perhaps may come in over budget when we're making a large purchase or a large project. So typically, it's not amended much the rest of the time, but usually we do it in January to get a sense of mid-year action and where we really true up to be. In May, as part of our budget approval, and then now in June, we as well, in the last council meeting of the year, of the fiscal year, we amend the budget as best we can. And our goal there is to avoid getting a nice little letter from the state that said we're in violation of the budget. It's okay to have too much in your budget, but you can never have too little in your budget. You're not allowed to overspend ever. They don't care if you guess on it wrong in the revenues. They're only worried about the expenses. So we know how to play the game and do the best we can. So that's what we're doing tonight. Is we're providing several budget amendments, and there's many pages in your packets that describe that. We're going to talk about the general fund a little bit first. On the revenue side, we're showing a reduction in revenues of about $290,000. And these are things we've talked about in the last council meeting, I think it was. But in short, the state revenue sharing projections, a large portion of that money comes from sales tax revenues. So this period between COVID crisis hitting us and the end of this our fiscal year, the state is projecting losses in our earlier projected revenues of $186,900. That's in this fiscal year. As I told council before, we expect that number in next fiscal year, which begins July 1st, to be roughly $375,000. But it's really early to guess that now. Certainly as the economy starts picking up again and there's more activity economically, the sales tax numbers will typically trend along with that. The rec programs, there's a loss in revenues there of about $171,000 there, largely because we've shut down most of our rec programs, and you'll see a corresponding reduction on the expenditure side for a lot of the program costs that we weren't able to be part of. And then the last item, these are the bigger numbers here. You'll see a detailed list in your packets, but construction permits actually are up above what we projected. And so there's an additional $96,000 there. And then there's a whole bunch of other pluses and minuses if you go through various numbers. So the overall general fund revenues are down $290,000. On the expenditure side, there are some adjustments to various departments and various funds. The public safety has a net change of $75,000. It looks to me like we had made an incorrect budget amendment early on and we missed something. So this isn't because they extremely overspent or underspent. It's just that we had missed a line item in the way, and so we're fixing that. On the street department, there's an increase of $67,000. The parks budget, there's increases there. And the rec department, there's the reduction significantly. There are additional transfers out to WeMet and also the district snowmelt assessment over at the Civic Center, which is roughly $19,000, which had not been caught in the first time through the budget cycle. We're going to be using some of the contingency to make that number balance to the same number as the revenues, so that the general fund balance or the budget will stay at the same number, revenues will equal expenditures. However, there is going to be a remaining contingency line item of about $187,000. So I expect that we will see a surplus in the end of this fiscal year of at least $187,000, and I suspect that number will be bigger than that because typically we budget more on the expense side as we do these year-end adjustments. Understand that a lot of bills come in the month of July and the month of August. We get invoices that come back to us, so it's really tough to guess exactly where we'll end up. But this will allow us to be able to increase fund balance to that 20% level as we discussed last week in the study session. And also our budget resolution does allow and authorize the finance director with consent of the city manager to transfer any surplus funds into the capital improvement fund if there are funds remaining after that. So my intent is to get us to that 20% level and then transfer additional surpluses funds to the capital improvement fund. So that's general fund. Any questions about general fund?
Any questions for Tim? Great.
Okay, then other funds, I just thought I'd summarize these briefly. The budget stabilization fund, we talked in our study session last week of making our investment market adjustments up and down through that fund. So these budget amendments will facilitate doing that, and that's our intent, is to reflect those adjustments to changes in investment earnings based on market values, plus and minus in the budget stabilization fund. The street fund, we're showing a reduction of $451,000 in road tax revenues. That's a pretty big number. The local street fund, $176,000 reduction in road tax revenues. So these are pretty significant impacts. The third thing that I will mention is in our Allegan County road tax, we are showing an increase of $117,000. This has to do with additional personal property tax monies. Also, there's a couple other adjustments to, are these too small?
Sorry.
Yeah, you could do the human zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of numbers on there. The debt service fund, the road tax fund, both of those have additional personal property tax reimbursement funds that are coming their way. And then the last two funds I thought I would mention is that the Windmill Island Garden Fund, we're projecting a loss of, in this year's operations, of about $522,000 at this point in time. Now that's because we didn't have any revenues during tulip time, and I think I've explained previously that last year during tulip time our revenues were our gate revenues, admission revenues, are roughly $650,000. Finally, the Civic Center, which is something that I'd been concerned about as well, there will be no additional operating transfers there this year. We met with the Civic Center folks and went through their math. They've gone through some ways to manage their budgets, and they are not asking for additional funds from the city to help get themselves into a balanced position. There's a slight additional transfer and some adjustments in the Civic Center budget itself, but there's no new additional operating transfers other than that district snowmelt adjustment that should have been, we just missed it in the prior year budget. So that's good news, I think, and that's sort of a summary of the other funds, and there's, like I said, there's about 25 more pages we could talk about, but I'll stop there. Any questions?
Any questions for Tim? Great, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Quincy.
So we know how this has affected tulip time. How do you see this affecting Windmill Island, the loss of revenue?
Well, as I said, there is a loss of $522,000. Now, I will also say that in the past few years, Windmill Island has been generating a surplus, and this will not put the fund in a deficit position. So we aren't, at this point in time, recommending additional transfers to Windmill Island. That fund can carry this loss this year because there's been a fair amount of surplus that's been generated over the past few years, largely due to the great success of tulip time, generating much more traffic than ever.
Thanks.
All right, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Tim? Great, thank you, Tim. We've got two different items here. Item 12E 4.1. That's just, I'm sorry, we're still on that first one. The year-end budget amendments. What's the pleasure of council?
Move we approve?
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support? Support, was that you, Mr. Byrd? That was Mr. Byrd. All right, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters. Yes. Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arthurst,
Yes.
Corbin. Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And I almost got ahead of myself there, Tim. You also have, not only do you have year-end budget amendments, you have information regarding the 2020 and 2021 insurance program.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Box and council. In past years, this conversation often took place in the pre-council meeting where we go through how the city is attempting to cover the risk of operating our operations here. And because there was no pre-council meeting tonight, I'm going to give a brief presentation tonight. And this slide presentation came courtesy of our fiscal agent that you approved the agreement for earlier in the consent agenda that allows us to use their services for another year. We pay them a fee of $75,000 for that. And then there's also a third-party administrator agreement that we approved in the consent agenda as well. But this is basically the overall program for the insurance program for the city, excluding things like health insurance and those kinds of things. This information came from them, and I thought it's useful to go through it with you somewhat. This year, they would have considered a flat renewal with increases of between 5 and 10%. There's been a hardening, as they describe it, of the marketplace due to natural disasters in 2017 and 18 and 19. In 2017, it was the worst on record with $140 billion in losses. 2018 was the fourth worst on record with $80 billion in losses. So this has caused rates to increase as insurers need to build up their reserves to allow for them to pay these losses. So there, prior to that, it had been what's called a soft market as opposed to a hard market. Part of what is driving some of these things is something they call convective modeling, which I don't want to explain. Wildfires, hurricanes, and various claims is the bottom line of all that. So that's sort of what that market looks like. In terms of some of the other components of that, in the auto liability piece, there continues to be what they call a hard market there, and the average rate increases there are between 10 and 15%. And also, there are some, in the physical damage side of this policy, we buy mostly liability and self-insure collision type of claims for our vehicles. So if, for example, a police vehicle were to get into an accident of some kind and we had to total that vehicle, we don't have collision insurance on that. We would simply take that vehicle and wholesale it out and replace it with another one without repairing it necessarily. But we had a large claim in 17, which has somewhat impacted our physical damage component. We do cover vehicles that exceed $100,000 in value. So the large dump trucks, the big bucket trucks, the fire trucks, those are the kinds of vehicles that we insure with full coverage or collision, so that if we had a loss of $100,000 plus, we wouldn't be put in the same position as losing perhaps a vehicle that's worth $30,000, which is a little more manageable for us. Okay, so that's a little bit about the market. Here is the way our coverage looks, and if you can't read this, I apologize. Let me just, we've seen a similar chart over the years. On the far left side of that chart describes something called, these are the different kinds of coverages we're buying from the marketplace. The far left column is something called boiler and machinery. This is basically any equipment that the city owns, or for example, if a chiller were to go bad in City Hall, starts leaking, works into the building, The building insurance wouldn't be responsible for that. The boiler and machinery coverage would kick in. So that number, we've got roughly we'll get to that number, but we've got some $250+ million in boiler and machinery type of assets. On the next line is the property. We have roughly 305 or some very large number of $1 million of property assets that we're covering. So you take those two numbers together, we're roughly $600 million in coverage of assets that we're paying for here. Following that column, a third from the left, is something called general liability. This is where the big risk tends to be. And there's a law enforcement column, there's an auto liability column, a public officials column, a sexual harassment column, a sexual abuse column, and then there's a crime column. So each of those are different kinds of coverages that are specifically identified in this coverage. And then as we continue working our way to the right, there's auto physical damage, there's workers' comp, there's pollution liability, there's pollution for the landfill, and then there's cyber liability, and the last item is something called blanket accident. So that's it's unique to the city for specific kinds of activities that are sponsored by the city should some terrible thing happen to a member of the public that's helping us out in a volunteer capacity. So that's a description of the different kinds of coverages. Now we're going to spend a little past $1 million here, folks. That's how we're spending it, okay? So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to describe it, or I'll be quiet. All right, no more of that, so let's keep going. We will get to the end soon, I promise. So there's two pieces of this, of how rates are, or how much premium we pay. The first is called the exposure, or the assets we're covering. And on this chart, it describes the auto liability. We're insuring 207 vehicles and 33 vehicles with full physical damage coverage. On the excess property piece, we're insuring 309 million. Now that number is down 422 million from last year, largely because we removed any electric generation assets out of this coverage this year. So the electric generation assets, such as the peakers and some of those things that weren't part of Holland Energy Park, have been removed from the coverage this year. That's why our overall costs are lower. Understand, however, that some of those costs will be reflected on the other side of the equation when the BPW is purchasing coverage for the power generation assets. The boiler machinery values are about 305 million. Workers' comp, the payroll there is about 28,500,000. So the way workers' comp works is different employees are classified with different kinds of risks. People like office workers have a very, very low cost per thousand because we get paper cuts and hopefully we don't trip and fall over the carpets. However, the guys out working the heavy equipment and the people on the front lines are certainly at a bigger risk for injuring themselves. And so their rate per thousand is higher. All right, so now those are the exposures. The next slide talks about our rates. So you take the value of the numbers times the rate, that equals the premium. So the rates this year, the auto liability rates are significantly higher. However, we were successful in reducing what we have to pay for the catastrophic coverage. And so the net auto cost isn't too terrible. You'll see that number on the next page. The physical damage liability number is higher. Excess property we were able to buy at a little lower rate per $1,000 of coverage. We're able to buy boiler and machinery at 1 cent per $100, if that excites you. How about that? The workers' comp numbers are lower in the overall rates, and our modification factor, which is a multiplier that you multiply the rate against, is now under 1 again. So if the rate is $1, you multiply that by 0.83, and that's the number you spend for workers' comp. Now, I know I'm in the weeds with you guys, and I don't mean to be too bad with you, but I think it's useful to at least go through the exercise.
You bring more gusto to an insurance explanation than anybody I've ever met.
Well,
Plus-
you know.
Plus, it's his last chance to do it.
That's
So
right.
We just had to let him go out in a blaze of glory.
Okay, we got another hour, let's go. So the next slide talks about the actual premiums, and I think this information is in your packet as well.
Do the numbers on the slides get progressively smaller as we get farther into the
I'll
presentation?
tell you, that second to last slide's quite small, I have to say. But there's no substitute for a good light. You can just shine it and beam it in. You'll see in the next page that the overall renewal cost at $1.2 million is less than last year's premium by $156,000, although the largest component of that is because we removed those electric generation assets. So we removed about $110 million of assets that we're covering. That's the reason these costs are less. You can look at a category by category. You'll see some pluses, some minuses. But for the most part, it's an excellent renewal. We were very pleasantly surprised that it came in as good as it did. The last slide shows how we're going to spend the money between the city, the BPW, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But in short, the city will spend a little less this year than last year, and it's largely because of reductions in workers' comp premium costs. And the BPW will spend less on this side of the policy for the same reason, but they will also have increases on their other side. That is my presentation, folks. Any other questions?
Questions for Tim?
Quick one.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
By the way, stellar presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just the assets that you referred to that were removed by the BPW.
Yes.
So they're going to go out separately and buy coverage for that, correct?
Correct. So last year, they, and the year before that, I could take a little bit further step back. When the Holland Energy Park was being constructed, there was a separate builder's risk policy for that. When that was put into service then, and that builder's risk policy sort of extended, for a few months beyond its final operation. But once it went into service, then they purchased a separate policy for Holland Energy Park. This year, as they were trying to, Gallagher was trying to purchase coverage for us, they were really struggling to place some of these peaker assets and some of those things. And this sort of made the whole process of this insurance pool get a bit convoluted as well. But the bottom line was they ended up removing them from this package and putting them into Holland Energy Park. So all the electric generation assets are now grouped together. And I think that makes pretty rational sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any
And
other
that coverage is
questions?
being
Yeah.
handled separately from this coverage, yes.
Any other questions, comments for Tim?
Just a
Yeah,
quick
Raul.
comment. So I typically wouldn't say that I'm intimidated by numbers, but the numbers that we look at on council, right, which is one of our biggest responsibilities, are on a different level, and it's just been a pleasure having you kind of driving the seat there. Because I don't know that I can go as far as to say that it's been fun, but it's definitely, it could be worse. It could be worse. No, but
It could be worse.
but you have a gift in making something so complex plain and easy to ingest, and you definitely instilled a major level of confidence in
Good.
what we do here at the city because of the work that you do.
Good, thank you.
Have done.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's very kind.
Any other comments, questions? Great, thank you, Tim. And I echo, and I think we all do, Raul's comments. You make the complicated seem understandable. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the fiscal year 2020-2021 insurance program?
Such a stellar presentation deserves a subsequently stellar motion. And that motion
Really?
being to approve, that city council approve the insurance program for 2021, fiscal year 2021, as well as insurance program for the Holland BPW electric generation assets as described below. It is further recommended that council approve an agreement with Alternate Service Concepts, ACS, for third-party administration services as well as Gallagher Bassett for the claims administration, subject as to form by the city attorney and authorized the finance director to sign all documents that bind the coverage as needed, subject to the Holland Board of Public Works insurance program for their electric generation units.
I'll provide stellar support.
We have a motion with gusto from Trethewey and stellar support from Corbin. Is there any animated discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Absolutely.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin. Hoekstra,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
You bet.
Motion passed.
Great, thank you. Next item is gifts. Kathy, could you please read the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts. Public Safety Department, Police Division, Equipment, Sean and Sherry Holst through Community Foundation, $990. Downtown Group, Windmill Island Gardens, Jane Dykstra, $100. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
What is the pleasure of council?
Motion to accept with appreciation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, Human Resources Wage and Classification Study Results. Mr. Van Beek.
And I know we went through this at study session last week, and there was a feeling of we just put this on consent, but not only is this just an important item that is kind of teetering towards putting on regular anyway, but there was one slight change, and just for full transparency, wanted Jen to come up and do an abbreviated, modified presentation of what you all many of you went through last week. So thanks, Jen. This was a lot of work, and appreciate the work that you've done on this.
Great, thank you. Can I also mention, real quick, when we speak of gifts, we received a nice gift today, some ice cream for our employees from Hudsonville Ice Cream. So that was a nice welcome back, since most people are back on site working and the beginning of summer. So.
And talk about Polar Patrol.
And we transported via the Polar Patrol. So it was really fun. I got to ride shotgun, and I felt bad though. We drive past little kids, and it was like, no, don't make eye contact. They're like, over here.
City and BPW.
Yes, city and BPW. So that was a generous gift. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
All right, well, good evening, Mayor Box and City Council. Like Keith said, we have already discussed much of this at last week's study session, but this way you'll fully understand it, and the folks that weren't here will get a good overview as well. So, as you've heard, conducting an external wage and classification study is really a best practice for most organizations, private and public sector organizations. It should be done every 2 to 5 years. So we did submit requests for proposal last July. It's hard to think that that was almost a year ago that we sent those out. We received a few proposals, and in September, we selected a Grand Rapids-based firm, and that is HR Collaborative. So the consultant from HR Collaborative was actually here and spoke to you and did a pretty good report at last week's study session. That report is in your packet, so for those of you that weren't here to receive it, you can read through that report. So like Keith said, there was one minor recommendation that was not included, but it did have a budgetary impact of just under $700 for the year, so we thought we would go ahead and present again tonight. So in the report that Lisa provided, she did include the process, the methodology. They did great work for us. It was very thorough. I was very impressed with the report. The job matching process was great. So, next slide, please. So over the last 8 months, HR Collaborative and Lisa and her team, they reviewed all of our job descriptions. They're not just looking at titles, but actually what our positions do for the city. They did meet with several city staff members, supervisors, managers, leadership team, and really discussed those positions in great depth to get a good understanding of what those positions were. And then they used data from MML, Economic Research Institute, Pay Factors, and the Michigan Equalization Department to compare salary data and kind of align and match up our jobs with other jobs in the government industry. So once they did that, and that phase was quite lengthy, as you can imagine, we have a lot of positions that they did have to look at very carefully, and they were going back and forth with questions for department directors and managers just to make sure that they were on the right track. But once that process was complete, Lisa came in, presented 38 recommendations for changes to our positions. So again, it's not just a wage study, but it's also a classification study. So they're also looking at things like the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. That was an impact for 3 of our positions to change those positions from a non-exempt position to an exempt position. Non-exempt is more hourly, exempt is salary, not eligible for overtime or comp time. And that's all based on a test that they run to see what those responsibilities entail in decision-making. So there were some title changes which don't have any monetary impact. The FLSA changes really don't have a monetary impact either, but then there were many recommendations that were either to upgrade or downgrade the position's classification. So of the recommendations, there were 38, like I said, 21 of those have a payroll impact or an increase. So you can see the report has a list of all of those various positions. So the title and FLSA changes, as well as the increase in classifications, will be effective July 1st, if approved. We did budget $60,000 for fiscal year 21 to implement the recommendations from this study, and we were pretty darn close because it came in at $58,796. I will mention, and I talked about this a little bit last week at the study session, over 50% of that budget is actually for 2 positions or 2 titles. And they're 2 really important positions here at the city. One is to reclassify our Human and International Relations Coordinator, Esther is currently in that position, to a director level, so taking her from a coordinator to a director. And we believe that that is in alignment with the DEI goals that you all have this coming fiscal year, and we feel that we're very supportive of that recommendation. Also, the other large increase was to change the hourly pay range for our cadet program. And we currently have 6 cadets that are in those positions, but we budget up to 8. And we've actually had some turnover lately because we were not paying enough. So when this recommendation came in, they were very excited to hear that over at HPD. And it's a great program because we get to know those candidates. That's the way I look at them. They're interviewing the entire time that they're at that front desk or in the booking downstairs in the jail. They do a great job for us. They work really, really hard. And it's a great way to see if they're going to fit with our core values at public safety and here at the city. So it's a great recommendation, and Keith and I were both excited to see that one come through from the consultant as well. So like I said, during last week's study session, she did have those 38 recommendations, but of those, there were many recommendations to actually lower the classification of some various positions. She is not recommending, and this is what she said last week, she's not recommending that we do that while those positions are staffed, but that we consider the current labor market and review the recommendation of the study when those positions become open. So that would be due to a retirement or attrition. So we're not downgrading anyone's pay. They would still, those people that are in those positions would still continue to receive the COLA that was approved tonight. So they wouldn't be frozen exactly where they're at. But as those positions become vacant, we would look at the study and see if that was one of the positions, and then we'd look at the job market data at that time and make those decisions if we'd like to make those changes. But just want to be clear about that. So it is recommended that City Council approve these recommendations of the report and allow the city to implement the changes effective July 1 for the new fiscal year.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Jen? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council?
Motion to adopt recommendation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support. Oh, go
I'm going to give that one to Aaron's Horse. Support by Aaron's Horse. Any discussion? All, great. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd? Yes. Peters?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnsworst?
Yes.
Corbin? Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Next item, Windmill Island Gardens reduced admission. Mr. Van Beek, and I see we have Matt Helmus here as well.
Yeah, Matt Helmus, and on some of the discussions earlier, certainly a disappointment in the sense of everything that's going on where we didn't have the revenues coming into Windmill Island Garden, but I will definitely point to this gentleman to my left as being one of the big reasons why we're in a totally different position as it relates to Windmill Island Gardens, where even though we don't want to take the hit, and I think he's grieving that hit more than anyone, we're in the position where we're able to do that because of the dedicated work of him and his staff. So thank you, Matt. And then the recommendation that you're making to us as it relates to getting back on track and doing some admissions out there. So thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. I did not bring a tin cup tonight, so that is a very good thing. We're looking as optimistically as we can. You all know it's been a very rough start to this year for us. 2 months late. We're literally and figuratively trying to keep our heads above water out there. I just want to give you a little bit of update along with this recommendation. Last year we had 117,000 paying guests at the island. That was a high for the last 3 decades at least. About 2/3 of those people, 75,000, came before June 15. That was our opening date this year. So that's the struggle we're going to face with the end of this budget cycle. Tim did mention our budget cycle, our cycle doesn't exactly sync up with the budget cycle as well. Tulip time comes at the very end of the budget cycle, so it doesn't really give us any chance to make up for it. We have about a month, and again, even most of that time was gone. So more folks are visiting later in the season. That's a good thing. We were actually set up to have a very good budget year with a moderate tulip time. Unfortunately, that was missed out. So we're looking forward to hopefully having a good end of the season and beginning of the budget year again this year. Again, our staff, thank you, Keith, because our staff has been wonderful. They've been very flexible. Just like all the other city staff, we've had to put folks on reduced hours, furlough them. They've been great. They've been coming back and keeping everything alive. We are open now as of Monday morning, so staff was very excited. It's a little bit different down there. If you've been down there, if you've seen the press releases, it's changed. The interior of the windmill, we're still working on a plan to get folks into the mill safely. That's one of the hardest spots. You've been in the mill. It's small, and we keep people on a 40-minute tour or so, 30 to 40-minute tour. We don't want to do that right now. I've had some talks with places around the country with similar locations to ask how they're doing that. So we're hopefully going to open that as soon as possible, along with the carousel, another difficult spot with kids touching and doing everything else they do. So we are again recommending that we reduce that fee. The fee this year that's been in place for the last couple of years has been $10 for adults, $5 for kids 3 to 15. Our recommendation is that we reduce that fee to $5 for visitors, and kids 8 and under are free. The reason being, again, one of the biggest attraction of Windmill Island being the windmill is not available. We're offering that in a video tour, so folks can go in the pavilion and watch a video. It's not quite the same. Anecdotally, we've had some people in the last few days show up, ask, is the mill open? When we tell them, virtually it is, not physically, they turn around and go away, unfortunately. Our numbers, again, we're only 3 days in, so we're positive, but they've only been about 1/3 of the numbers we've seen this time last year in June. People are not traveling. And again, I don't blame them at all. My family's not traveling either for our safety. And this is very, very similar to what's going on in other places. But again, we're very happy to be relying on that fund balance a little bit. We are hoping, again, to go back to $10 for admission as soon as we can, offer them somewhat of a windmill tour. It'll probably be changed from what's in the past. We're going to continue as a staff to make adjustments where we can, add things where we can, any changes we can for a best and safe guest experience. And again, we've been talking to folks at Dutch Village, Mackinac, Frankenmuth, just to compare notes with them. The whole tourism industry is demolished right now, basically. So we're doing the best we can out there, keeping staff positive. The ice cream today was great, made staff put a smile on their face. Again, I'm here for any questions, but we appreciate your support through what will probably be a rough season, kind of a salvage operation this year.
Great. Any questions for Matt? Yeah, Mike.
Matt, you were probably primed for this because I said something last week, but I'm just wondering why we would consider 3/4 of the way through the season raising the rate back up. Would we not, and you are by far the expert, but my feeble mind says I would rather have half of something than all of nothing. Because people are gonna say, I'm getting part of a tour, I'm way at the end here, I still gotta pay $10. Why would I go?
No, that's a great point, Mike. And we're one of the cheapest games, I shouldn't say the cheapest, but we're a very competitive price in town already. Again, really the reduction we're asking for is because of the mill tour. We know, again, there's folks who are not gonna pay our full admission because they don't get the mill tour, and that's, again, the prime attraction. So right now, we're trying to get folks in the door, you get a little bit of money. Our shops are open, so I've been asking them, how are your sales? We get a chunk of that revenue, as you approved earlier tonight. But I think when we can get back to it financially, we need to get the admission numbers we can. I think with our numbers, we'll be down this year, even for the last half of the season here, they'll be down. And to compound that with a lowered revenue is gonna be, we'll be eating through that fund balance very quickly. And I think once we can offer them a mill tour in some capacity, and again, we're not gonna try and, if it's not worth it, we wouldn't bump the rate back up there. It'll be when we actually have a quality experience for them in the mill. And I think it's a fair rate right now, and that, again, comparing ourselves to others, so we'd like to get back there as soon as we can.
All right, you're the expert.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Matt?
Easy.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
What is the pleasure of council?
Move we adopt the recommendation.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Raymond. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, communications from the city manager. Clock reads 5 minutes to 8. Not
I
that
think
that
I'm
means
good then.
anything in particular,
I
but
think
I'm just,
good then. I
I'm
can
just
say a
letting you
few
know.
things. All right, all right. Just a couple things. One, I think the agenda that you had tonight in particular, Kathy, what did we end up with? We got to Z2, Z1?
Z3.
Z3. I don't ever remember seeing that. I don't know if any of you, but it was a packed agenda. And I think that really it reflects what we've been experiencing across the city, that there's some return to normalcy. But quite frankly, there's a rush to make up for lost time and projects that we're experiencing from the outside in, but quite frankly, also from our internal projects. So no rest for the weary. So we're cranking away. So sorry for a particularly heavy agenda. I think it's fair to expect that there might be more of this. I don't think the volume in the number of items,
1,200 pages.
but I think maybe the time, welcome back. Welcome back, folks. And we're glad to have you and spend time with you. I think I just caution though, I think there's still continued confusion out there where there still are a lot of limitations on social distancing and gatherings and those types of things. So as we have discussions and take a look at, quite frankly, even the 36 project and public interaction, we're going to manage that best we can, but there's certainly still concern, and we're going to take that into account. On a related note, council, you'll recall, approved a contract with Hitchcock and SB Friedman to really do the next steps of our very successful Waterfront Holland citizen engagement process. And those next steps in engaging with those consultants, while COVID-19 has certainly impacted many things, I'm happy to say that we've actually continued to have inquiries regarding Waterfront Holland vision and interest in where we left that off with a vision and the documents and guiding principles that you adopted, which is, that's nothing but very encouraging. So we hired our consultants specifically to engage with those type of developer inquiries, to test the market, to begin to evaluate that potential interest, and then eventually to come back and report to you as council for recommended strategies and next steps. And I'm just formally letting you know that we're in the process of releasing the consultants to do that specific work to engage with the inquiries that we have. So we're gonna hand that work off to them, so they'll do that, and then again, as we outlined with that proposal, then they will come back at a later date and give more recommendations. We had, what was the word? Tim was stellar this evening. But just to let you know, we are now, we're initiating the finance director hiring process. We've had that posted for some time, and we are doing some kind of rapid fire first round interviews next week. So we are in line with pursuing that process. And also just to let you know, thank you. You'll obviously approved a budget position for what I think is a very important assistant city manager position in economic development and sustainability. But with market uncertainty and budgets and all those types of things, I'm evaluating some options right now to take a look at maybe a best road forward intermediate with that. So stay tuned. And with that, we have, I'll let you know that the 4th of July fireworks celebration has been postponed. And we're really, a lot of times I think people didn't realize that this was actually the Macatawa Area Coordinating Council fireworks that they coordinated on behalf of all the local governments. It was kind of rolled into the larger WJQ event. Those are postponed at this point, but we are definitely hoping and planning and holding those funds so that should situations change, that we're looking to maybe have a later in the summer or fall kind of community celebration, if not for the 4th of July, just that we're able to gather as community and celebrate. So put that on your radar. Really cool, huge thank you. And I think Brian left, but this would really be for him. And play the video here, Matt, please. That was hard to understand a little bit probably, but that was a thank you for the crosswalk. Jenny White from Velo City approached Brian and myself, and you guys supported this behind the scenes. You may or may not know this, but we installed a crosswalk at the corner of Grosskop in the Crestview neighborhood. And isn't that cool that someone that made that request gathered that collection of young people in the community and took the time to send that to us. So pretty cool. We definitely made sure to share that with Brian and his team. Oh, sorry, I kept doing that. And then one last thing, we're trying to, again, return a little bit to that form of normalcy. You remember at the beginning of the year, we really wanted to kind of take a moment and show a video periodically. And here's one of those videos that if you haven't seen on our social media pages, we think it's pretty cool. So Matt, hit it. not only a pretty talented video crew, but our parks crew, Emily, leading all of this, does great work. So just wanted to take a second to highlight them. And that's all I have tonight, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions for Keith? Yeah, Quincy.
This isn't I guess that video kind of ties into it. What has been the buzz or the word on how what we approved last week not last week, but the week before, on seating arrangements and since business is open downtown?
Yeah, I'm going to have Matt kind of speak if he has any more recent, but I think it's been very positive. There is still a sense of a little bit of caution, so I think the numbers haven't certainly fully returned. But I think what you approved and what we've put in place out there has definitely increased the numbers that otherwise would have come out. I know that I'm kind of making a daily trek to try to kind of hit every restaurant at least during lunchtime. And certainly large appreciation from the owners that have taken advantage of it. And I think it looks really good downtown, and we've tried to do it in a very safe way, and have had rave reviews at least about what we've put in place. Matt, do you have any
so
better
Keith
info?
pretty much hit it on the head. Amy has been in discussions with a number of the additional merchants that are interested in doing that, especially on the east end of 8th Street. It's got a kind of this neat little vibe now that wasn't there. That block, the super block building, the area there, it seemed to kind of widen. You know, the streets were wider, the trees were maybe not as mature. And moving those out in the parking spaces, and we actually moved some of the giant concrete urns that were on the sidewalk out into the roadway to act as additional safety barriers, has given it this kind of closer in, nicer feel. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback. You know, I went through there at lunch, and the Curragh had people sitting in those places, in those spaces. A number of the Crust 54 had them. So a number of the restaurants down there are using them. And when you think about kind of the margins that a lot of those restaurant operations operate on, you know, 50% capacity is that's probably right where they're going to lose or make money. So if we can push them, even if it's just a couple of tables, over that into a higher capacity range, that's just going to benefit them. So lots of positive feedback. A lot of people have been really interested in doing that, and I think it's been successful.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments for Keith? No, great, thanks, Keith. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Keith was saying, where things are starting to heat up and get a little bit more active. We had been in the process just before COVID-19 hit of reviewing boards, committees, and commissions, and so I was holding off on making appointments to boards, committees, and commissions because I didn't want to appoint people and then do a restructuring right after that. I don't think any of us expected that 12 weeks later we would still be dealing with this. So we are in the process now that more staff is in the building, that we're going through, and we're going to be filling more of those open seats that are on boards, committees, and commissions. We will get back to that review and that study, but we wanted to try to get those spaces filled up as well, so that there are other ones in the pipeline, but we do have one for you this evening for the Board of Public Works, and that is Patrick Thompson. If you don't know him, he is a stellar candidate. He has been highly involved in the community. He is a great business person in the community, and it came as a recommendation from the Board of Public Works, and I could not have been more excited to get that recommendation from them. And so that is the recommendation before you this evening.
Take that in the form of a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like to make that in form of a motion for me?
I would love to make that in the form of a motion to accept the recommendation of Patrick Thompson to the term expiring June 30th of 2025.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? All those in favor? Do we need the roll call on that one? I think we'll do a roll call. We'll do a roll call just to be safe. Can't go wrong with a roll call vote.
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnsworst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yeah, and Quincy, I'm going to follow up on your comment as well, just to let everyone out there know that if you're interested in shopping downtown Holland, or if you're interested in dining downtown Holland, we do have the two websites, shopdowntownholland.com and dinedowntownholland.com. You can use those to order, you can use those to make reservations, you can use those to shop. You can pick things up or view things there. It's been a great opportunity. And I was down over the weekend. I was downtown on Friday night. I think there was a line at every restaurant that we went by. And even on Saturday afternoon, there were crowds. The parking spaces are full. It's wonderful to see that activity downtown Holland again. So, appointments, motions, communications from council members. Yes, Mr. Corbin.
Just a couple things. Many of you know Ward 5 have been hosting community and conversation meetings for the past 6 months, or approximately 6 months. We were meeting in person. Unfortunately, with COVID, we hadn't been able to do that. So the past couple months, we've been meeting virtually. We don't get a lot of people, maybe a dozen at most at times, but we still meet. Our next ward meeting, for those who are listening, will be tomorrow, June 18th from 6 to 7. If you go to my Facebook page, you can find the link or dial in and have a conversation with us. Our topic will be recycling. We do have Aaron Thellenwood, who will be attending, kind of give us a brief presentation on what the current status of our recycling program in the city is, and answer any questions that our community might have. And the second thing is, I brought this up at the study session last week, was how can we get feedback from all of our colleagues on the board here regarding committees? I'm on the Parks and Rec and a few of the other committees, and I'd like to have an opportunity for each of us to brief each other out at some point in time. I think we need to talk about this real seriously here soon so that we can understand what's going on. We can read a lot of minutes, but some brief understanding of what you're doing on your committees will all help us understand what's going on a citywide level. So I think it's beneficial. To include, I think we need to get together and really have a discussion on committee appointments and how the process is going to work, as we have talked about in the past. So I just would hope that you would all entertain that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Any other communications from council members?
It's a great idea.
Yes, Mr. Trethewey. Nope. Lynn, did you want to go?
Yes.
Ladies first.
I just wanted to mention that this week we'll be commemorating on June 19th, commemorating Juneteenth, which is the recognition of the ending of slavery in the United States. And Holland usually celebrates with the Holland community really celebrates a day-long gathering of music, dance, and food down at Collin Park, and unfortunately they won't be able to do that this year. And as Quincy said a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of work to do around racial equity and racial justice, but this is a great opportunity to learn a little bit about this history. There will be an event at the Maple Avenue Ministries on Saturday from 9 to 3. There will be lots of black-owned businesses in the parking lot where you can go and learn about what's available in the community and just engage with some of our neighbors. So I would encourage you to do that and celebrate Juneteenth in any way that you think you can and should.
Great, thank you. Good to hear something's going on in all of this era of cancellations. It's wonderful. Mr. Trethewey, I know I teed you up for that one, didn't I? Yes.
Usually about this time of the year, people get sick of me talking about the truck parade. Well, they're not going to get sick of me talking about the truck parade this year, because this will be the first and last time this year. It was under great conversation, last minute decision, or not actually last minute, but we were hoping to do something, because we all felt on the foundation that about Labor Day, people are really going to need something to get around, something to get out, something to see, something to be different. Unfortunately, with all the unknowns at this point, and even up to the fact that we were not going to have the social gathering at the Civic Center to make things safe, we just felt it was unwise this year to have the parade at all. Not being able to guarantee the social distancing along the parade route. So it was a hard decision, but the decision came. And unlike some of the other events, we are in a pretty good financial situation. So we are going to be coming back strong, bigger than ever. We have a little inside joke. Last year we had 75 trucks. I've challenged our organizer and our people to do 100 trucks next year. This was our 15th year, that'll be our 16th year. So we're gonna stack them and pack them as much as we can, just to make up for this year. So we appreciate all the support. Just remember, Labor Day is specifically out there to recognize the businesses, the trucking industry, and everything that makes this community work. So support them any way, shape, or form that you can, and we will be back in 2021.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Any other communications from council members? Great. Item 16B, in regard to 36th Street, this is the proposed zoning change for lots on 36th Street, and this is just an item for first reading. What is the pleasure of council?
Move to adopt.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Trethewey. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yep.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And I will now entertain a motion to enter closed session to review a legal opinion with the city attorney. I don't believe that there's any intent to have any action following the closed session. I think that what we will be doing is just coming right out of closed session and then adjourning. But I would entertain that motion right now.
So moved.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Arnshorst. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin. Yes. Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And Matt, we're gonna do 5 minutes to get things wrapped up and we'll take a break? We gotta get the video stuff taken care of. So thank you very much. We're not planning, for those of you who may be watching at home, and I saw a sneak preview, there were, I believe, 5 of you watching on YouTube. So for the 5 of you that were watching on YouTube, I don't believe we're gonna be doing anything. We're gonna be rolling out of here. We will be coming back just for a few moments to go into open session before we adjourn the meeting. But that should be it for this evening. So thank you very much.